The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
This is a reading of the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, at which the Pharisees and the scribes murmured, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus addressed 3 parables to them. This is the third. Jesus said, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that's coming to me.' So the father divided up the property, and some days later this younger son collected all his belongings and went off to a distant land where he squandered his money on dissolute living. After he had spent everything, a great famine broke out in that country, and he was in dire need. So he attached himself to one of the propertied class of the place, who sent him to his farm to take care of the pigs. He longed to fill his belly with the husks that were fodder for the pigs, but no one made a move to give him anything. Coming to his senses at last, he said, 'How many hired hands at my father's place have more than enough to eat, while here I am here starving? I will break away, I will turn to my father, I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against God, I have sinned against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired hands.' With that he set off to his father's house. While he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was deeply moved. He ran out to meet him. He threw his arms around his neck. He kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against God. I have sinned against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' The father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring out the finest robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, put shoes on his feet. Take the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' Then the celebration began. Meanwhile, the elder son was out on the land. As he neared the house on his way home, he heard the sound of music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked him the reason for the dancing and the music. And the servant answered, 'Your brother is home. Your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back in good health.' The son grew angry at this and would not go in. But his father came out and began to plead with him. And he said in reply to his father, 4 years now I have slaved for you. I never disobeyed one of your orders, yet you never gave me so much as a kid goat to celebrate with my friends. Then, when this son of yours returns after having gone through your property with loose women, you kill the fatted calf for him.' 'My son,' replied the father, 'you are with me always, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice. This brother of yours was dead. This brother of yours has come back to life. This brother of yours was lost and is found.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Most of the sermons that I have given on this gospel for 39 years, it's a long time, have been about family. And because the parable is addressed about a family. It tells a story of a father and two sons and tells the tragedy and tells of the redemption. This year, the Lord kind of tapped me on the shoulder and say, you need to look at this in a different way, in the way it was written. In Luke's gospel, and what was the purpose of that? So I did. The visual is you have a group of tax collectors and sinners. You have a group of scribes and Pharisees. And you have a group of disciples of Jesus. That's the setting in the gospel. And here's the division. The division in the gospel is Jesus was a tax collector and sinner magnet. It says all the tax collectors, all the sinners were gathered around to hear Jesus and to eat with him, which is taking the relationship to a deeper level in that culture. Okay? You don't just eat with anybody. You eat with somebody with whom you have or wish to have a relationship. Okay? So that generated all of this judgment on the part of the scribes and Pharisees. They would no more associate with tax collectors and sinners or eat with them. They would rather die, because that means becoming unclean. That means associating with those who do not keep the tenets of your religion. It is associating with those who violate your religion. Okay? And here's the disciples watching this and listening and hanging on as to what is Jesus going to do now. Because he is being discredited by those with whom he associates, which also discredits us as disciples of Jesus. Do you get the dilemma here? Okay. It's a real dilemma. That's the scene that Luke sets up. And then it says, and Jesus tells three parables, the prodigal son being the third. Okay? Now, first of all, we must remember that the story is a parable, which means it's a metaphor. Okay? Jesus didn't tell the story of a real-life family. Okay? Not yours, not mine, not any real-life family. He's telling the story as a metaphor, which the family is a metaphor of what? The family is a metaphor of those who are here. The tax collectors and sinners, the scribes and the Pharisees, and Jesus. It's a metaphor for this dynamic that's going on right in front of them. All right? So the dynamic is the tax collectors and sinners are obviously the prodigal son. Okay? Now, what did the prodigal son do? Well, the prodigal son did, in that culture, commit the unforgivable sin. The unforgivable sin is that you bring shame on your family. You bring shame on your family. You make your father divide up the property, and you take it away to a distant land, never to come back. That property, the value of that for the family is gone forever. For generations to come, it's gone, and it's half. What does that do to your family? What does that do to the standing of your family in the community? it diminishes it by more than half. It brings shame on your family to everybody who's related to you and everybody who knows you, and it's all your fault. Okay? And so, and then you're gone. You're totally out of the picture. You and half of that property are totally out of the picture, seemingly never to return, never to come back. And the older brother, good riddance. Amen? Because you brought shame not only on, you brought shame on me. You brought shame on me and my family. You impoverished us for generations to come. That is the unforgivable sin. The last person ever to even think about forgiving you is going to be your older brother. Mm-hmm. And should be your father. Your father should never forgive you for that sin because of the shame that was brought. The irreparable harm. You can never make up for that. You can never make restitution for that harm that you did to your family. Okay, do you get the magnitude here? Get the magnitude of this thing, okay? So Jesus told the story putting this brother in the worst light possible in that culture. The worst light possible, okay? So here are the tax collectors and sinners listening to this, okay? What does that sound like? You've committed the unforgivable sin. That's the scribes and the Pharisees. They're over here. It's like, yeah, they have committed the unforgivable sin. They have brought shame on our family. They have brought shame on our people, our nation, our religion. They have brought shame on us. And that's why we judge them. That's why we don't forgive them. That's why we don't associate with them. That's why we don't eat with them. And what the heck are you doing? I'm glad I said heck. Almost slipped there. Okay, Bob, back off a little. And then the guy, how many hired hands, The guy is just suffering the consequences of his own wrong. I mean, the Jesus painting this picture of how he became destitute. And here's the scribes and the Pharisees said, yeah, he should. That's the consequences of sin. God's temporal punishment due to sin. Good Catholics. Do we still talk about that? We still talk that way, don't we? You don't remember that. You too. Okay. Temporal punishment due to sin. That's right. You should be destitute, and you should spend the rest of your life destitute because of the shame you have caused to our family. And then Jesus tells a little bit more of the story. So, how many hired hands have more than enough to eat? I will go back. I will confess my sin, and I will ask my Father to treat me like one of the hired hands. What? Treat you like one of the hired hands? Let you back in on our property, eating our food, even as a hired hand? That is more compassion, more forgiveness, more acceptance. The scribes and the Pharisees could not even consider that maybe on the outside, maybe on a good day, maybe as some kind of reparation to God, that would be the ultimate act of compassion if you would let him become a hired hand. The ultimate act of compassion. And only if he was a good hired hand, and only if he did his job every day, and the minute he slipped up, you're out. You're back to destitute. The father ran out to meet him. The father didn't even listen to his confession saying, I am no longer deserve to be called your son. The father didn't ask, what did you do with all my money? What did you do with all the property? What have you been doing? Did not get this, lengthy confession of all of his sins. Didn't ask for it. welcoming him as a son, not as a hired hand. Finest robe, ring on the finger, shoes on the feet, fatted calf. You're my son. Whatever you have done, you're still my son. Whatever you are undeserving of, you're still my son. At this, these guys are like, that's, no Jewish head of household would ever do that. Would never do that. Impossible. Inconceivable. Inconceivable. And these over here are like, whoa, really? Really? Even though I don't deserve? Really? I can still be claimed as a son, as part of the family? Really? It's just as incredible to them. It's equally incredible to both. And then the kicker. The older son, the older brother, okay. And it fits them to the T, you know. It's like, and the argument between the father and the son, you know, the debate. For years I have slaved for you. Yeah. For years I have slaved for you. Never disobeyed one of your orders. Yeah. And you never gave me so much a kid goat to celebrate with my friend. Yeah. That's all their argument. That is. And it's all true. It's all true. It's not exaggerated. You know, they obeyed the laws, obeyed the law. Slave. You know, never going overboard about anything. You know, that's it. That's it. And the father didn't deny any of it. Did you notice that? Didn't argue with him about, you know, what is your claim to righteousness? Did not argue the claim to righteousness. What does the father do? He focuses on the other son. As your brother. As your brother. He's not claiming him as a brother. The father's claiming him as a son. Therefore, he is your brother. Because I say so. The head of the household says, he's my son. He's still my son. Therefore, he is still your brother. Whether you like it or not, whether you accept it or not, he still is. And he's alive. And he's alive. He's not dead. He's not physically dead. And he's not morally dead. And the relationship is not dead. Do you get that? It's all about the relationship. The relationship is not dead because the Father says it's not dead. The Father says the relationship is alive and it's repairable and I am repairing it and you will accept that as a member of this family. You will accept that. And the disciples are witnessing all of this. And they came from both sides. The disciples came from the side of tax collectors and sinners and the sides of scribes and Pharisees. And becoming a disciple of Jesus meant they had to learn to be sister and brother to each other because Jesus claimed them all. Jesus claimed them all. So whatever family they were from, they now had this family in Jesus that they had to abide by his acceptance, by his compassion, by his mercy, by his inclusivity. They had to abide by that if they were going to be a member of the family. Okay? For me, meditating on this parable, this metaphor in this light, broadens it way beyond my own personal family and our bumps in the road and our needs for reconciliation and conversion, all of which are real. Amen. You know, real for any family that I know. Amen. Okay. But it broadens it beyond that, and it broadens it literally to our mission as church. Our mission as church. Okay? And I meditated on that. I kind of did a little historical meditation first, because that's, being 65, you just do that. You think about, well, how were things in the 50s? Well, in the 50s, the Catholic Church, if you got divorced, you were excommunicated. Okay? If you showed up in a Protestant church, you committed a mortal sin. If you took your life, you wouldn't be buried in the church. And if you were a priest and left the priesthood, you were excommunicated and condemned to hell. Okay? Those were all facts. Okay. And then we had Vatican II. Okay. And now you could possibly get an annulment. Maybe, but maybe not. If you took your life, you could be buried in the church, depending on the priest. Okay. If you were a priest and you left the priesthood, maybe you could get laicized. Maybe. There for a decade, none of those were granted under John Paul II. And you could go to a Protestant church. It was okay now. You could do that. And but if you're gay, then well, if you're celibate for life, then you could be okay, maybe, kind of. So it's some kind of processing that, and then I start processing what I read about Pope Francis. Stuff that he's saying, stuff that he's doing. He's now taken to his cell phone. He's making calls back to Argentina. He's making calls to people who write him letters. This woman wrote him a letter about that she got pregnant out of wedlock, and she found out that the father of her baby is already married and already has other children, and what should she do? So Pope Francis calls her up and has this conversation, and gives her real moral credit for keeping her baby, for bringing her baby to term and to being the mother, and then she asks, but what about, where will I find a priest to baptize my baby? And he says, I will. Okay. And then he meets with bishops in Brazil, all of them. It'd be like coming to the United States and meeting with all the bishops in the whole United States, And he chastises them. The Pope chastising a whole country of bishops. Okay, on 2 accounts, according to the press. You don't care enough for the poor. You're not doing enough for the poor. Would you ramp that up? Give more of your attention to the poor. Okay, and then quit being so clerical. Get yourself and get your priest off the pedestal. Quit doing that. Really? Okay. And then on the way back home, he was interviewed by some reporters on his plane, and they asked him about gay people. And he said, if they're a good person and are honestly searching for God and honestly trying to live a good life, he said, who am I to judge? Who are you to judge? You're the Pope. Isn't that what popes do? Isn't that what hierarchy do, is to judge? Just that question, who am I to judge? And it wasn't, the context was about gay, but you can kind of broaden that as well. It's like, and so you bring that back to this parable, and you say, okay, Jesus was acknowledging reality. Jesus didn't sugarcoat, gloss over whatever reality. Okay, John 3:16. God so loved the world that God sent his only begotten Son, not to condemn the world for its sin. The sin is real. But God did not send the Son to condemn. God sent the Son to save. Okay? The parable of the prodigal son is the metaphor of John 3:16. This is how the Son saves both brothers. This is how the Son saves both brothers. And it's the responsibility of both brothers to live up to that salvation, to let go of the sins that estrange you from God, to let go of the sins that makes you judge others, to let go of that, and to be reconciled with God, and then to be reconciled with each other. Amen?